Welcome back to the third part of my Bleach poem analyses. This video is going to be covering half of the second season of Thousand Year Blood War. For those unaware, the poems recited after the credits of the Thousand Year Blood War anime are inspired from the poems that Kubo included at the beginning of each manga volume, almost always recited by the characters shown on the cover of said volume. Some of the poems in the anime are from the manga, while others are new ones written for the anime exclusively, and I'm going to be going into how I think they relate to or flesh out their respective characters. I'm not fluent in Japanese or poetry, so I'm not going to be going over how accurate the poem translations are, outside of certain cases here or there, or if the poems are arranged in a proper format. So if you are fluent in Japanese or poetry, feel free to comment your thoughts down below, I'd love to read them. I'm just going to be expressing my interpretations of the poems as they relate to the characters in question, so let's pick up where we left off.
Freezing ice created from synergy quells the impatience of his burning blade.
So this is about Rangiku and Toshiro both, specifically in regards to their fight against Basbi, but from Rangiku's perspective. I didn't really get it completely until I read the Japanese version and looked at a more literal translation where it's more like, and this is just my interpretation, it reads more like, our backs frozen together, or frozen back to back, illustrating how the two of them are fighting together, dependent on each other for their tag team. It's basically Rangiku observing, and I suppose in a fond way, that her presence is what's allowing Toshiro to keep a cool head throughout the fight, or rather, pointing out that Toshiro is only able to quell his impatience thanks to Rangiku being there with him, which is kinda cute, at least I'm sure it is to her, since she finds Toshiro relying on her to be adorable. I did like this fight to a degree, just because it's one of the few times in Bleach where characters actually team up and aren't fighting 1v1, they're coordinating their attacks. So seeing combos like Rangiku and Toshiro's vacuum ice wall stuff was neat, even though I have no idea how the science behind that makes sense at all. But I wish it happened more often. Bleach fights are more like a runaway show in a way, with the combatants being the models, showing off their powers one by one until a fight is over. It's all very stylish and choreographed in a way, so it's not often you get to see two people fighting side by side like this, but I do enjoy it when it happens. And of course the burning blade part is just there's a bit of irony, I suppose. To oppose the freezing ice of the preceding line, Toshiro using ice but having burning emotions speaks for itself. I guess you could also see it as a reference to Basbi, who uses actual burning attacks, freezing ice to quell Basbi's flames. I think it's written intentionally so that you could think of that at first glance, but then go, oh no, it's about Toshiro. I don't know if you would call that a red herring or just misdirection, but I'm pretty sure it's not actually supposed to be about Basbi, but I could see why one would interpret it that way.
I will splatter your life on the wall. Just like I do with love.
So this is the poem that stirred me to make these videos in the first place, since interpretations of Bambi's poem that I've seen online are very weird and usually involve stuff like Bambietta being in love with Naklevar and him breaking her heart or something. You know, creating fanficky backstories about her being in abusive relationships that shattered her dreams and psyche and stuff like that. People on Reddit love to come up with weird stories about Bambi's sex life, and it's all very bizarre. Especially since this is such a straightforward poem, you'd have to be competing in the Olympics of mental gymnastics to arrive at anything super deep with it. It's just saying that she doesn't think anything of people's lives, just like how she doesn't think anything of love. She has sex to let off steam, and she kills people to let off steam. And these two things coincide sometimes, as we've seen with our boy Marcel Haltman. They equally don't mean anything to her. It's not anything more than just her being a childish psychopath. And on the note of Naklevar always being brought up as being like her ex-boyfriend or lover or something, he just sits next to her at the table. That's about the extent of their relationship. All of this is to say is that Bambietta is a girl who's perpetually stuck with the mind of a 16-year-old. Well, even worse than that now. Who doesn't care about people's lives nor people's hearts, which admittedly is almost hypocritical of her, since she does understand the value of her own life, saying herself that she only fights to stay alive, but, like I said, she's basically just a bratty teenager, so her logic not being exactly airtight isn't exactly surprising. Also, I hate how people say she's the strongest Bambi. She's not. She's not a high-tier Sternritter. She sucks.
I will continue to fight myself. as long as I have the fangs in my heart.
So, turns out, I have a lot to say about Komamura, and I didn't expect that since he isn't really one of my favorite characters at all. Like, at all. So actually, in order to explain how I'm interpreting this poem, we have to take a step back and talk about something that the manga itself never really tackled, namely what the fuck his werewolf clan actually is. Based on the terminology used by Sajin's elder, namely the usage of chiksho, which basically means beast, when referring to themselves, we can gain some subtle insight into more of the cosmology of the universe of Bleach. Well, maybe it isn't so subtle if you're Japanese or more familiar with Buddhism, but I'm assuming most English-speaking Bleach fans don't fall under those two categories, and I just mean Kubo's not being explicit in laying these things out for us, that's it. Now, Chikusho doesn't just mean beast in a casual sense, like, oh, they're wolves, so of course they're beasts. No, in this case, it's specifically referring to the beast realm of Buddhism's cycle of reincarnation. If you aren't familiar with that, then basically there are 6 realms of existence that you can be reborn into. The Deva realm, God realm, human realm, Asura realm, beast realm, hungry ghost realm, and hell, Naraka realm. Collectively known as the 6 paths. If that sounds familiar, then it's probably because you've watched Naruto and now you know the inspiration for the 6 paths of pain. Bleach draws a lot from Buddhism, but for now, I'm just going to be talking about how it relates to Sajin, and the takeaway here is that Sajin's elder mentions that their clan was sent to the Chikusho-do, which is literally just the name for the beast realm I just mentioned. So the idea here is that their clan died, was reborn into the beast realm, then eventually made their way to the Soul Society. I've seen people over the years trying to figure out which of Bleach's realms are supposed to align with each of the 6 path realms, but I'm not sure if there's ever been any actual consensus on it. The human realm is obvious, as is hell, and the hungry ghost realm is probably Wako Mundo, but after that it's a bit more vague. I'm leaning towards the Soul Society being the Asura realm, Asuras being described as sort of battle-hungry demigods, which kind of describes at least the original 13 courts to a T, and that would leave the Deva God realm to be the Ryokyu, where the Soul King resides, but even then I don't think you can reincarnate into the Ryokyu, so not all this is going to be a one-to-one to how things work in Bleach, but this does seem to be where Kubo's basing his ideas from, at any rate. So, this leaves us with the Beast Realm. In Bleach, I have no idea where that would be, or if it's even its own dimension or world like the other ones are. It's probably something like Hell, where it isn't actually classified as one of the 3 worlds, but it is still its own thing, maybe like the Valley of Screams. But if we're following the more Buddhist idea of why you're sent to the Beast Realm is due to bad karma, due to the sins they committed as humans, causing them to be trapped as beasts upon reincarnation. And as the Elder described, the humanification technique requires breaking the chain of that sin to return to the state they were before their descent to the Beast Realm. So Sajin would be returning to how he looked like as a human, or something more closely similar at least. I'm not sure if they were actually a clan of literal werewolves while they were alive in the world of the living. I mean, the Bleach world does have ghosts and dragons and stuff, so I guess werewolves wouldn't be too far-fetched. I just assumed they called themselves a werewolf clan because they were cursed to be wolves upon reincarnation, but maybe they were just actual werewolves already in the first place, and the crimes they committed as werewolves is what placed them a seat in what is basically hell. I personally think that they were just normal criminals who died and wound up in the Beast Realm and then wound up in the Soul Society as werewolves at some point for whatever reason. But I do think that they might have actually been sent to literal Bleach Hell at some point between all of that, because there are allusions to the Hell Realm in Komamura's Bankai. His Bankai is called Kokujo Tengen Myo, with the Kokujo part referring to a level of the Buddhist Hell Realm called Kala Sutra, which is reserved for killers and thieves, and the Myo part referring to the Myo figures in Buddhism, often translated as wisdom kings, in charge of doling out punishments. Komamura's Bankai being a reflection of yourself, referencing the wisdom kings of the Hell Realm sort of makes me think that at some point him and his clan were sent to Hell prior to coming back as werewolves in the Soul Society. No clue if that's Kubo's intended message or if he had thought any of this that far ahead back then, but I feel like it probably lines up with what we know about Bleach's universe thus far. far. Of course, just having a reference to some Buddhism realm in your Bankai name might not actually mean anything. I mean, Hitsugaya's Daiguren Hyorin Maru does as well, with the Daiguren part referencing the deepest and the coldest of the 8 levels of the Cold Hells, the Great Crimson Lotus Hell. And I doubt Toshiro is also some reincarnated criminal or anything. Also, as an aside, the levels of the Central Great Underground Prison are named after the 8 levels of the Hot Hells, the 3rd level being Shugo and the 8th being Muken. But while I similarly don't think he's a reincarnated criminal, Tosen's Bankai draws a sort of cute parallel to Sajin's. Tosen's Bankai is called Enma Korogi, with Enma referring to the Buddhist king of hell, who judges which level of the hell realm a sinner is sent to. So take his Bankai, add Sajin's Bankai to it, and the image you get is a duo who judges people and then doles out due punishment on them, which is kinda what they tried to do to Zaraki in the Soul Society arc. Tosen sized him up, judged his character, and then Komamura came in afterwards to try and mete out punishment. I really like Sajin's and Tosen's dynamic. I've always thought that Tosen was one of the better written characters in this series, and Sajin becomes more interesting of a character thanks to his proximity to Tosen, and he's like a foil and sort of an inverse parallel to him, which is interesting. One of them went from human to beast in his quest for revenge, while the other went from beast to human in his quest for revenge. And both of their journeys begin with, or at least have an origin in relation to, an original sin. For Komamura, it's the sins of their clan that he had to sacrifice his heart to break, and for Tosen, it's the sin of the Soul Reaper ancestors who shaped the world into what it currently is, a world that Tosen hates. Unfortunately for them both, the powers that be require the status quo to be maintained, so they both ended up dead by trying to sever those chains. The Werewolf Elder can be seen as almost a parallel to Ichibei in that sense. They both manipulate others to perpetuate the cycles that their respective people's sins have forced upon them. Ichibei needs the Soul King to remain in place, and the Werewolf Elder needs others to keep sacrificing themselves so that he can keep on living. Sajin and Tosen ultimately were just cogs in those wheels, sadly enough. I always found Sajin's descent into revenge an interesting direction for his character because it made him a hypocrite for how he spoke to Tosen earlier on. He acted very holier than thou to his friend, but later found himself in his friend's shoes, and the Elder even points out this hypocrisy. Though I feel Sajin viewed his actions as just and righteous because of his debt to Genryusai, that honestly just makes the parallel all the stronger. I like this dynamic between the two of them, and I honestly feel like it was a missed opportunity to not have Sajin fight Esnaut. He fights Bambietta instead, even though Esnaut is the guy who's all about fear, and fear is the thing that Tosen was all about, and I think Kubo could have done something very interesting with that. Also, speaking of fear, I find it strange that Sajin plays no role at all in Can't Fear Your Own World, despite the entire story revolving around Tosen. Like, I mean, I get why he's not, like, there presently, because he's a wolf, but not even, like, in a flashback or anything? I mean, come on. Anyway, with all of that foreplay over and done with, let's actually talk about Sajin's poem. As long as there are fangs in his heart, he'll continue to fight himself. This is the Kokoro heart, not the physical beating heart that he sacrificed to his elder, but the symbolism is clear-cut either way. As long as there's even a shred of his past within him, he'll continue to be at odds with himself. As long as he retains his ties to the beast realm, he'll fight his own desires, so the only way to be true to himself is to cast away that past and unchain himself from his own sins, which is what he does end up trying to do. Unfortunately for him, he was too similar to Tosen for his own good, and being true to his own desires caused him to be permanently trapped in the form that truly symbolizes his own sins. There's also the angle of the poem basically expressing that he'll always be fighting with himself, no matter what he does, because he'll always have those fangs in his heart, no matter what. He has very deep-seated self-hatred and doesn't see an out to it. Like Tosen, he's a pretty tragic character, but also like Tosen, at least he won't be leaving his heart behind.
The heavens resound with deceit. The captive heart dances to the melody.
I'm actually kind of surprised that Rose even ended up getting a poem, because he isn't really much of a main character or anything, and even like his stunt in the episode that this poem's about, he's only around for about like 4 or 5 minutes. Like, I mean, cool, but it is surprising. Anyway, it's about that fight against Masked Masculine, where he uses his Bankai. The heavens resounding with deceit is about his Bankai's ability to create illusions that become real if you believe in them, which is a really cool power, by the way. Another translation of Mayakashi, what they translate as deceit, would be make-believe, illustrating more of what it is that Rose's Bankai is doing. It's inducing a sort of suspension of disbelief in the opponent, which I really love. Too bad Rose is a visored and isn't given any good showings in the entire series. Because his abilities could have pretty easily made him a final boss tier character like Byakuya was back in the Soul Society arc. What he seems to be able to do with his music in both Shikai and Bankai is quite sprawling. But back to the poem, a main point of interest I've found in it is in the second line, where it mentions the captive heart dancing to the melody. That's not actually what the Japanese version says. There's no mention of dancing. What the localization translates to dancing is the phrase hashiru, which from what I've been able to gather is actually in this context a musical term, which means to rush, as in relinquishing the current rhythm and gradually increasing the tempo while you progress the performance, which more or less describes Rose's actions during his fight. You can tell that he began to, feel himself a little after he trapped Mask in his Bankai, sure that he'd seized victory, and his newfound elation made him begin to pick up the pace and rush things a little, leading to his own defeat. So in that context, a more fitting translation might be along the lines of, the melody rushes because of the captive heart. And honestly, looking at it that way, I feel like it's almost a safe bet to say the captive heart here was not even Mask's, but Rose's own heart, captive by his own performance. So it's sort of a new lens to view the fight through, I suppose, but not really much you couldn't glean on your own. Rose is an artiste and tends to get lost in his own music, it seems, and that led to his defeat. I will say, though, and I've maintained this for years, that Rose did not lose because he explained his powers. Like so many other characters in Bleach do that, it's not just Rose. This is something that fans love to joke about. Rose's Bankai sends his music directly into the opponent's eardrums, which is why Mask had to blow his own out. So there's no way Mask could have actually heard Rose's explanation of his Bankai's power over the music and what the music was causing, like the flames and such. Mask just reached an obvious conclusion about the weakness of the Bankai's ability and did what most people wouldn't have the healing abilities to do. It's like how Bambietta couldn't actually hear Shinji explaining his Shikai ability, but still one-hit KO'd him by using common sense. Rose isn't stupid, and I'm not just saying that because I'm biased towards him because he's one of my favorite characters. I just hate how he keeps getting clowned by the fandom because of this one fight. And it's like, guys, everyone in Bleach explains their powers. It's not why Rose lost. Stop saying this joke. Okay, so I'm gonna end the video here because I rambled on about Komamura for way longer than any human being ever should. I don't like Komamura, okay? I need you guys to understand that. I don't care about him, but there was a lot of interesting things to cover in his part of the script. I just kept typing, and I don't like it, but it is what it is. Let's just move past it. That's it for this video. I'll see you next time when I cover the second half of 1000 Year Blood War Season 2. And like always, if you have any thoughts on my interpretations, leave them in the comments below. If you have your own interpretations, also leave those in the comments. And if you actually know Japanese and want to point out this or that I got wrong, or may have misinterpreted or mistranslated or misread, let me know. That's always cool. And if you like Bleach in general, we have more Bleach stuff on my channel. We did an entire fandom of Can't Free Your Own World. It's really cool. My friends did a great job. And if you like stuff like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy, we do stuff like that as well. I stream every now and again. I'm currently streaming Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Check that out. Hang out with me when I do that. Like and subscribe. See you guys next time.